Commander Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Forward Base Meridian, watching the distant stars through the reinforced glass. The base floated in the empty space between two solar systems, a metal island in the vast darkness. Jake had been stationed here for 3 years, and the view never got old. 12 human colonies spread across different star systems, all connected by the amazing technology called quantum bridging that let ships travel faster than light. The morning shift was just beginning when Lieutenant Amy Foster rushed into the command center. Her face was pale and her hands shook as she held a datapad. Jake had never seen Amy look scared before. She was always calm, even during the worst situations. "Commander, we have a problem," Amy said, her voice barely above a whisper. Long-range sensors picked up something strange. Jake walked over to the main display screen. The image showed a map of their sector of the galaxy, with green dots marking human colonies and blue dots showing the worlds of their allies, the Zephyrian Council. The Zephyrians were a group of 7 different alien species who had been running this part of space for thousands of years. They were peaceful and had welcomed humans when they first arrived. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. Amy pointed to the edge of the screen. "There, sir. Something big is moving toward us from the void between galaxies. It's not showing up as solid matter, but it's definitely there." The display showed a dark area that seemed to bend space around it. Jake had seen many strange things in space, but this was different. It looked like a hole in reality itself, and it was moving fast. "How fast is it going?" Jake asked. "Too fast, sir. Faster than anything we've ever recorded. And Commander, there's something else." Amy's voice dropped even lower. 3 Zephyrian colonies on the outer rim went silent yesterday. Their quantum communication arrays just stopped working. Jake felt his stomach drop. Quantum communication was instant across any distance. If those arrays stopped working, it meant something terrible had happened to those worlds. Dr. Lisa Campbell entered the command center at that moment. She was the base's expert on alien life and had spent years learning about the Zephyrian species. Her usually neat hair was messy, and she carried a stack of data tablets. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa said, not bothering with formal titles. "I've been analyzing the last transmissions from the Zephyrian colonies before they went dark." She activated her datapad, and the room filled with strange sounds. It was like static mixed with what sounded like screaming, but not from any creature Jake had ever heard. The sounds made his skin crawl. "This is from Colony Vextar," Lisa explained. "Population 40 million. Listen to this part." She played a section where the static cleared for a few seconds. A Zephyrian voice came through, speaking in their clicking language. Amy quickly translated through her computer. "Something comes from the dark between stars. It eats light itself. Our weapons do nothing. The void ships phase in and out like ghosts. They turn our matter into screaming darkness. Tell the humans. Tell them to run." The transmission ended in more static and then silence. Captain Ryan Brooks walked into the room just as the message finished. Ryan commanded the reconnaissance ship Wanderer and had just returned from a patrol mission along the frontier. His ship was one of the fastest in the human fleet, designed for deep space exploration. "I heard about the communications blackout," Ryan said, "but there's more. On my way back, I detected massive gravitational disturbances coming from the direction of the Zephyrian homeworld. Something's happening out there, and it's big." Jake stared at the display screen again. The dark anomaly had moved closer in just the few minutes they had been talking. It was heading straight for the most populated star systems in their sector. "Lisa, what do you think we're dealing with?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. "I've never seen anything like this. The energy readings don't match any known natural phenomenon. This isn't a black hole or a star collapse. The signatures suggest advanced technology, but operating on principles we don't understand." Amy's communication board suddenly lit up with incoming signals. She put on her headset and listened for a moment, her face growing even paler. "Commander, we're getting emergency broadcasts from multiple Zephyrian worlds. They're all saying the same thing. Something is systematically destroying their colonies, moving from system to system. And sir, whatever it is, it's not just killing the populations. It's making the planets themselves disappear." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of military service, fighting pirates and dealing with colonial disputes, he had never faced anything like this. The idea that entire worlds could simply vanish was beyond his understanding. "How long until it reaches human space?" he asked. Ryan checked his navigation computer. "At its current speed and trajectory, maybe 2 weeks, but Commander, if it keeps accelerating like it has been, it could be here in just a few days." The command center fell silent except for the hum of computers and life support systems. Everyone knew what this meant. Humanity had only been in space for a few hundred years. They had good ships and weapons, but nothing compared to the ancient Zephyrian technology. If the Zephyrians couldn't stop this threat, what chance did humans have? Jake looked around at his team. Amy was still monitoring communications, trying to get more information from the dying Zephyrian colonies. Lisa was analyzing the energy readings, searching for any clue about what they were facing. Ryan was calculating flight paths and evacuation routes. "Amy, send an emergency message to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "Tell them we have a situation that threatens all human colonies. We need every ship they can spare." "Yes, sir," Amy replied, her fingers flying over her control panel. "Lisa, keep analyzing those energy signatures. There has to be something we can learn about this enemy." "Already on it," Lisa said, her eyes glued to her data screens. "Ryan, I want you to take the Wanderer on a reconnaissance mission. Stay far, away from the anomaly, but get us better readings on what we're dealing with." Ryan nodded. "I'll launch within the hour." As his team got to work, Jake stared out at the stars again. Somewhere out there in the darkness between galaxies, something ancient and terrible was coming for them all. The peaceful life humanity had built among the stars was about to end, and Jake had the feeling that everything they thought they knew about the universe was wrong. The silent void was no longer silent. Something was stirring in the darkness, and it was coming their way. Admiral Susan Clark sat in the war room deep inside Earth's orbital command station. Around the large table sat the top military leaders of humanity. The holographic display in the center showed their sector of the galaxy, but now most of it was dark. Red zones marked where Zephyrian colonies had gone silent. The dark area was growing larger every hour. "How many worlds have we lost contact with?" Admiral Clark asked. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez looked up from his datapad. His eyes were red from staying awake for 3 days straight. 47 Zephyrian colonies, ma'am. That's over 2 billion people, just gone. No distress calls, no evacuation signals. They just stopped transmitting. Major Chris Taylor stood near the tactical display. He was humanity's best special forces commander, a man who had led boarding actions against pirate ships and hostile stations. But his face showed worry as he studied the enemy's movement pattern. "Admiral, this isn't random destruction," Chris said. "Whatever this thing is, it's smart. It's hitting the most populated worlds first, then moving to industrial centers. It knows exactly what it's doing." The main screen suddenly flickered and Amy Foster's face appeared. She was still at Forward Base Meridian, monitoring the last communications from Zephyrian space. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Kethmore," Amy said, her voice tight with fear. Everyone in the room went quiet. Kethmore was the Zephyrian homeworld, a massive planet covered entirely by one giant city. 40 billion aliens lived there, making it the most populated world in known space. If Kethmore was under attack, the situation had become much worse. "Put it through," Admiral Clark ordered. The room filled with the clicking sounds of Zephyrian language. The computer translated the words into English, but the fear in the alien voice needed no translation. "This is High Council Kethmore to all remaining colonies. We are under direct assault by unknown forces. Enemy ships are phasing in and out of normal space. Our most powerful weapons pass through them like they are not there. They appear to exist in multiple dimensions at once." Static filled the transmission for a moment, then the voice continued, more desperate now. "The enemy fires weapons that unmake matter itself. Entire sections of our city world are simply ceasing to exist. We estimate 6 hours until total planetary consumption. We are transmitting all our technological and historical data to human space. You are our sector's last hope. Remember us." The transmission ended with a sound like tearing metal and then silence. Admiral Clark closed her eyes for a moment. The Zephyrians had technology thousands of years more advanced than humanity. Their energy shields could stop planet-killing weapons. Their ships moved faster than anything humans had built. If they couldn't fight this enemy, what chance did humanity have? "Danny, what do we know about these enemy ships?" she asked. Chief Engineer Rodriguez activated his display. "Based on the sensor data from our reconnaissance missions, they're unlike anything in our databases. The ships seem to exist partially, outside normal space-time. They can become solid to attack, then fade back into some other dimension to avoid return fire." "Ma'am," Major Taylor interrupted, "I've been studying the attack patterns. These aren't explorers or conquerors, they're hunters. They move through space like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attacks perfectly. And they're headed straight for our most populated colonies." Admiral Clark stood up and walked to the large window that looked out at Earth. The blue planet seemed so peaceful from here, but she knew that in a few days, the enemy would reach human space. "How long do we have?" she asked. 3 days until they reach our outer colonies," Amy reported from the communication link. "Maybe a week before they get to the core worlds. Then we fight," Admiral Clark said simply. "Danny, I want every ship equipped with our heaviest weapons. Chris, prepare boarding teams in case we get a chance to capture one of their vessels. We need to learn how their technology works." The first battle came sooner than expected. Captain Ryan Brooks was returning from his reconnaissance mission when his ship, the Wanderer, detected enemy vessels near the human colony of New Boston. The planet held 3 million settlers and was humanity's farthest colony from Earth. "Wanderer, to Fleet Command." Ryan's voice came through the communication system. "I have visual contact with enemy ships. They're incredible, like nothing I've ever seen." Through his ship's cameras, everyone in the war room could see the enemy for the first time. The ships looked like they were made of living shadow, constantly shifting and changing shape. They moved without any visible engines, sliding through space like dark fish through water. "There are 12 enemy vessels around New Boston," Ryan reported. "They're firing some kind of energy beam at the planet's surface. Everywhere the beam touches just disappears. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just gone." Admiral Clark watched in horror as sections of New Boston's cities simply vanished, leaving perfectly smooth craters behind. The enemy weapons weren't just destroying matter, they were removing it from existence entirely. "Fleet units are moving to engage," came a report from the tactical station. 6 human battleships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near New Boston. They were humanity's best warships, armed with plasma cannons and nuclear missiles. The ships immediately opened fire on the enemy vessels. The human weapons struck the enemy ships and passed right through them. The enemy vessels flickered like ghosts, becoming solid only long enough to fire their reality-destroying beams at the human fleet. "Direct hit on the battleship Thunder," came the panicked report. "The ship isn't damaged, it's just not there anymore. 40,000 crew members gone." One by one, the human ships vanished under the enemy's impossible weapons. Within minutes, the entire attack fleet had been erased from existence. The enemy ships then turned their attention back to New Boston, and within an hour, the entire planet was gone. 3 million people, their cities, their hopes and dreams, all reduced to empty space. Admiral Clark stared at the tactical display in shock. Humanity's best weapons were useless against an enemy that could step in and out of reality at will. "Ma'am," Danny Rodriguez said quietly, "I might have found something. The Zephyrian data they transmitted before Kethamore fell contains readings about electromagnetic disturbances around the enemy ships when they phase between dimensions." "What kind of disturbances?" Admiral Clark asked. "Massive ones. Every time they shift from solid to ghost-like, they create huge electromagnetic pulses. I think their phasing technology might be vulnerable to electromagnetic interference." Major Taylor looked up from his tactical studies. "You mean like an EMP weapon?" "Exactly," Danny said, his voice growing excited. "If we can hit them with a powerful enough electromagnetic pulse while they're shifting between dimensions, we might be able to disrupt their phasing ability, make them solid long enough for our weapons to work." Admiral Clark felt the first spark of hope since this nightmare began. How long to build EMP weapons powerful enough to affect their ships? Give me 24 hours and every engineer we have, Danny replied. You have them, Admiral Clark said. Chris, prepare your boarding teams. If we can disable one of their ships, we need to get inside and figure out how their technology works. As the meeting broke up and everyone rushed to their assignments, Admiral Clark remained at the window looking down at Earth. The enemy had destroyed humanity's most advanced weapons without taking a scratch. They had made entire worlds disappear as if they had never existed, but humans had something the Zephyrians didn't have. They had the ability to adapt quickly, to try crazy ideas when faced with impossible situations. The giants of the galaxy had fallen to this dark threat. Now it was up to the newcomers, the young species that everyone underestimated, to find a way to fight back. Admiral Clark just hoped they could figure out how to hurt the enemy before humanity joined the Zephyrians. In the growing silence of space, the weapon testing facility on Mars was buzzing with activity. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez had not slept in 48 hours, but his eyes were bright with determination. Around him, hundreds of engineers and scientists worked frantically to build humanity's first electromagnetic pulse weapons powerful enough to affect the enemy ships. How are the tests going? Admiral Clark asked as she walked into the main laboratory. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead and pointed to a large device that looked like a giant metal ring. The prototype EMP generator is ready, ma'am. We've made it 10 times more powerful than anything we've built before. If this doesn't work, nothing will. Colonel Nathan Price stood near the testing chamber. He was a ground forces commander who had fought in every major human conflict over the past 20 years. His weathered face showed the strain of watching enemy ships destroy 3 more human colonies while they worked on the new weapons. Admiral, we just received word from the evacuation fleets, Nathan reported. We've gotten 2 million people off the outer rim colonies, but we're running out of time. The enemy will reach the core worlds in 2 days. Dr. Rebecca Stone looked up from her computer console. She was humanity's leading expert on quantum physics, brought in to study the enemy's dimensional technology. Her usually calm voice was filled with excitement. Admiral, I think I understand how the enemy ships work, Rebecca said. They don't actually disappear. They shift into a parallel dimension that exists alongside our normal space. When they attack, they partially manifest in our dimension, then retreat back to theirs. Can we follow them there? Admiral Clark asked. Rebecca's face grew serious. That's the problem. I've been working on dimensional detection equipment, and what I found is terrifying. The parallel dimension where they hide is not empty. It's full of something that shouldn't exist. Captain Kevin Hayes entered the laboratory at that moment. He commanded the experimental ship Defiance, which had been chosen to test the new EMP weapons. Kevin was known for taking dangerous missions that other pilots wouldn't accept. Captain Hayes, are you ready for the field test? Admiral Clark asked. Kevin nodded. The Defiance is equipped with the new EMP generators and reality anchor prototypes. We've also installed Dr. Stone's dimensional detection equipment. If there are enemy ships hiding in that parallel dimension, we'll find them. The first test came when enemy ships attacked the mining colony of New Denver. The colony was built on a large asteroid and housed 50,000 miners and their families. Long-range sensors detected 12 enemy ships moving toward the asteroid. Captain Hayes positioned the Defiance between the enemy and the colony. As the dark ships approached, flickering in and out of normal space, Kevin activated the EMP generators. Brilliant blue lightning erupted from the Defiance, creating an electromagnetic storm that filled the space around the enemy ships. For a moment it worked perfectly. The enemy vessels became solid and stopped their ghostly flickering. Direct hit with plasma cannons, Kevin reported over the communication link. Enemy ship destroyed. The EMP weapons work, but the celebration was short-lived. Within minutes, the remaining enemy ships adapted to the electromagnetic interference. They changed their phasing frequency and became immune to the EMP weapons. They're learning, Dr. Stone said in amazement as she watched the sensor readings. Their technology is adapting to our countermeasures in real time. Worse, the reality anchor prototype that Dr. Stone had installed on the Defiance began malfunctioning. The device was supposed to lock small areas of space into a single dimension, preventing the enemy from phasing away. Instead, it created a growing tear in space-time itself. "Kevin, get away from that rift," Admiral Clark ordered. "The reality anchor is tearing a hole in the universe." Captain Hayes tried to shut down the malfunctioning device, but it was too late. The rift expanded rapidly, threatening to consume the nearby star system. The Defiance barely escaped as the dimensional tear swallowed 2 of the remaining enemy ships along with a small moon. "The reality anchor technology is too dangerous," Dr. Stone reported after analyzing the data. "We're dealing with forces we don't understand. One mistake could destroy entire solar systems." Meanwhile, Major Chris Taylor had been studying intercepted enemy communications. His team had managed to decode some of the alien signals using advanced computer programs. "Admiral, you need to hear this," Chris said, activating the communication. "Recordings." Strange voices filled the room, speaking in a language that hurt to listen to. The computer translation appeared on screen, and everyone read the words with growing horror. "Harvest proceeds as planned. Essence collection from primitive species continues. These humans show more resistance than expected but remain insignificant. Increase consumption rate to maintain schedule." "They're not trying to conquer us," Admiral Clark realized. "They're harvesting us, like farmers collecting crops." Dr. Stone's face went pale. "That explains the parallel dimension readings. Admiral, I don't think the enemy ships are just hiding in that other dimension. I think they're storing something there. Something they've taken from the worlds they've destroyed." The reality of their situation became clear when Rebecca managed to get a clearer look into the parallel dimension using improved sensors. What she found made everyone in the command center feel sick. "The parallel dimension is full of trapped consciousness," Rebecca reported, her voice barely a whisper. "Every person from every destroyed world is still alive in there but not really living. They're being kept in some kind of suspended state while their life energy is drained to power the enemy fleet." Admiral Clark stared at the dimensional readings showing billions of trapped minds from hundreds of destroyed worlds. The Zephyrians were in there, along with species humanity had never met. All of them were being slowly consumed by the enemy. "How long have they been doing this?" she asked. "Based on the number of trapped minds, I'd estimate thousands of years," Rebecca answered. "Maybe longer. This enemy has been traveling between galaxies, harvesting entire civilizations." Colonel Price stepped forward. "Ma'am, if conventional weapons won't work and the reality anchors are too dangerous, how do we fight them?" Dr. Stone looked at her dimensional readings again. "There might be a way. The enemy's weakness isn't their technology. It's their arrogance. They've been harvesting primitive species for so long that they haven't bothered to develop defenses against 3-dimensional attacks delivered through their own dimensional pathways." "What do you mean?" Admiral Clark asked. "They expect us to fight them in normal space using normal weapons," Rebecca explained. "But what if we don't? What if we send our weapons into their dimension and attack them where they think they're safe?" Captain Hayes, who had just returned from the disastrous reality anchor test, overheard the conversation. "Dr. Stone, are you saying we can build weapons that work in their dimension?" "Not exactly," Rebecca replied. "But I think we can build small ships that can survive limited trips into their parallel dimension. Ships small enough that the dimensional stress won't tear them apart like it did the reality anchor." Major Taylor studied the tactical implications. Hit and run attacks in their own dimension. It's crazy enough that it might work. Admiral Clark looked around at her team. They had lost millions of people and dozens of worlds to an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. Their best weapons were useless, and their most advanced technology was too dangerous to use safely. But humans had always found ways to win when everything seemed hopeless. "Dr. Stone, how long to build these dimensional fighters?" she asked. "Give me 1 week and every resource we have," Rebecca answered. "You have it," Admiral Clark said. "And Dr. Stone, make sure those ships can carry more than just weapons. If billions of minds are trapped in that dimension, we're going to find a way to set them free." Outside the laboratory windows, the stars seemed dimmer than before. Somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the enemy fleet continued its ancient harvest, unaware that the species they considered insignificant was about to change the rules of the war entirely. Lieutenant Commander Alex Murphy strapped himself into the pilot seat of the experimental fighter called Phase Hunter 1. The small ship looked nothing like the sleek vessels humanity usually built. Instead, it was covered with strange crystals and metal coils that Dr. Stone's team had reverse-engineered from captured enemy technology. Alex, remember that you can only stay in their dimension for 15 minutes. Dr. Stone's voice came through his helmet radio. Any longer, and the dimensional stress will tear your mind apart. Alex checked his instruments one more time. Behind him sat 3 other Phase Hunter pilots, all volunteers who knew they might not come back from this mission. They were about to become the first humans to enter the enemy's parallel dimension while still alive. Phase Hunter Squadron ready for dimensional jump, Alex reported to General Patricia Wells, who was coordinating the operation from the command ship. Good luck, Alex, General Wells replied. Remember, this is just reconnaissance. Get in, see what you can find, and get out. Don't engage the enemy unless you have no choice. Alex activated the dimensional drive. The universe around him twisted and bent like he was looking through broken glass. Colors that had no names flashed past his eyes, and sounds that shouldn't exist filled his ears. Then everything went quiet. He was in the enemy dimension. The first thing Alex noticed was that normal physics didn't work here. His ship moved by thinking about where he wanted to go instead of using engines. The space around him was filled with a strange gray light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Phase Hunter, 2 to Alex, came the voice of his wingman, Lieutenant Sarah Davis. Are you seeing this? Alex looked around and felt his stomach drop. The parallel dimension was huge, much bigger than normal space, and it was full of things that made no sense. Floating islands of metal and stone drifted through the gray void. Some were the size of cities, others as big as moons. Those are the harvested worlds, Alex whispered into his radio. The enemy didn't destroy them. They brought them here. As his squadron flew deeper into the alien dimension, Alex began to see movement on the floating islands. Billions of figures walked around in slow, dreamlike motions. They looked like the people and aliens from the destroyed worlds, but something was wrong with them. They moved without purpose, like sleepwalkers. Sarah, are you getting readings on those people? Alex asked. Massive life signs, but low brain activity, Sarah reported. It's like they're alive, but not really living. Just like Dr. Stone predicted, the Phase Hunter Squadron continued deeper into the dimension until they found what they were looking for. Ahead of them floated the enemy mothership, a structure so large it looked like a small black moon. Unlike the ghostly ships they had fought, in normal space this one was solid and real in its home dimension. General Wells, we found their main base, Alex reported. It's enormous. I'm seeing thousands of enemy ships docked around it and something else. There are streams of light flowing from the harvested worlds into the mothership. Dr. Marcus Johnson's voice came through the radio from the research ship. He had been studying captured enemy technology for weeks. Alex, those light streams are probably the life energy being drained from the trapped minds. The mothership is feeding on the consciousness of billions of beings. As Alex watched the horrifying sight, his ship's sensors detected something unexpected. Some of the trapped beings on the floating islands were not moving like sleepwalkers. They were looking up at his squadron and pointing. They can see us, Alex realized. Some of them are still aware. Lieutenant Commander Murphy made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving immediately, he flew his Phase Hunter down to one of the smaller floating islands. His ship landed near a group of Zephyrian survivors from Kethmore. One of the aliens approached his ship. Even in this strange dimension, Alex could see the intelligence in its large eyes. The Zephyrian touched the hull of his fighter, and suddenly Alex could hear its thoughts directly in his mind. Human, you should not be here. The alien's mental voice was weak but urgent. The Devourers will sense your presence soon. You must leave. How many of you are still aware? Alex asked, speaking out loud since he didn't know how to send thoughts back. Not many, the Zephyrian replied. Most fade into the dream sleep within days. But some of us from different species have found ways to stay awake. We have been waiting for someone to find us. Alex felt hope surge through him. Can you communicate with others who are still aware? Yes, but carefully. The Devourers monitor our thoughts. They must not know we plan to resist. Before Alex could ask more questions, alarms began sounding in his fighter. Sarah's panicked voice filled his helmet. Alex, get out of there. Enemy. Ships are coming. Dozens of them. Alex looked up to see dark shapes moving through the gray void toward his position. The enemy had found them. He quickly lifted off from the floating island, but not before the aware Zephyrian sent one final message into his mind. Tell your people that we remember our names. We remember our worlds, and we will help you when the time comes. The Phase Hunter Squadron raced back toward the dimensional gateway that would take them home. Enemy ships pursued them, firing weapons that turned the gray void into burning chaos. Alex's fighter was hit by some kind of energy beam that made his instruments go crazy. Hull breach in Phase Hunter 3, came the voice of Lieutenant Tom Brooks. I'm losing dimensional stability. Hold together, Tom, Alex ordered. We're almost home. The dimensional gateway appeared ahead of them, a spinning circle of normal space that looked like the most beautiful thing Alex had ever seen. Phase Hunter 3 was trailing energy and beginning to fade as the dimensional stress tore the ship apart. Go, 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 Tom shouted over the radio. I'll hold them off. Alex wanted to turn back and help his friend, but he knew that the information they had gathered was too important. The 4 phase hunters became 3 as Tom's ship exploded in a flash of impossible colors, taking several enemy vessels with him. The remaining fighters burst through the dimensional gateway and back into normal space. Alex immediately began, transmitting everything they had recorded to General Wells and Dr. Stone. The enemy isn't just harvesting our bodies, Alex reported as medical teams checked him for dimensional exposure. They're harvesting our souls, our consciousness, our very essence. But some of the trapped minds are still fighting back. Dr. Stone studied the dimensional readings from Alex's mission. This changes everything. If we can coordinate with the aware survivors in the enemy dimension, we might be able to stage a rebellion from inside their own stronghold. General Wells looked at the tactical reports. The enemy fleet was only hours away from reaching Earth itself. Humanity's remaining colonies were being evacuated, but there wasn't enough time to save everyone. How many phase hunters can we build before the enemy arrives? She asked Dr. Stone. Maybe 20 if we work through the night, Dr. Stone replied. Then we build 20, General Wells decided. And this time, we're not just going in for reconnaissance. We're going to coordinate the biggest prison break in galactic history. Alex looked out at the stars where the enemy fleet was approaching. Somewhere in that parallel dimension, billions of minds from hundreds of worlds were waiting for rescue. They had been prisoners for years, decades, maybe centuries, but they had not given up hope. Tom died to get us this information, Alex said, quietly. We're going to make sure his sacrifice means something. Dr. Marcus Johnson was already working on modified communication equipment that could send messages into the parallel dimension. If they could coordinate with the aware prisoners, they might be able to turn the enemy's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The final battle was coming, and for the first time since this nightmare began, humanity had allies on the inside. The enemy had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that harvesting consciousness would make their victims helpless. Instead, they had created an army of angry prisoners just waiting for someone to give them a chance to fight back. President Helen Carter stood in the war room aboard Earth's largest space station as enemy ships filled the viewing screens. The Dark Fleet had finally reached humanity's home system. Hundreds of shadow-like vessels moved through space like a swarm of deadly insects, ready to harvest Earth's 8 billion people. All phase hunter squadrons report ready, Admiral Jake Morrison announced. He had been promoted after Commander Morrison's heroic leadership during the crisis. Now he commanded humanity's entire remaining fleet. 20 small phase hunter fighters waited in formation, each one equipped with dimensional drives and modified weapons designed to work in the enemy's parallel dimension. More importantly, each ship carried Dr. Marcus Johnson's communication equipment, designed to coordinate with the trapped minds in the enemy's dimensional prison. Dr. Campbell, are you receiving signals from the prisoners? President Carter asked. Dr. Lisa Campbell, now serving as humanities coordinator with alien species, nodded as she monitored the dimensional communication array. We have contact with aware survivors from over 60 different species. The Zephyrians are organizing resistance groups on the floating prison worlds. The final battle began when the enemy mothership materialized partially in normal space above Earth. The massive structure was even larger than the Phase Hunter pilots had reported, stretching across thousands of miles like a metal continent floating in the void. "All ships execute Operation Liberation," Admiral Morrison commanded. The Phase Hunter squadrons activated their dimensional drives and disappeared from normal space. Lieutenant Commander Alex Murphy led the first squadron directly toward the enemy mothership while the other fighters spread out to attack the prison worlds where billions of minds were trapped. Inside the parallel dimension, Alex found chaos. The aware prisoners had begun their rebellion exactly as planned. On the floating islands that had once been harvested worlds, people and aliens were fighting against the dream sleep that kept them docile. Streams of light that normally flowed from the prison worlds to the mothership began flickering and breaking. "The rebellion is working," Alex reported over the dimensional radio. "The prisoners are disrupting the energy flow to the enemy ships. Their power systems are becoming unstable." Admiral Morrison, coordinating the battle from normal space, watched as the enemy fleet suddenly became less organized. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination now struggled to maintain their ghostly phasing ability. "All conventional units attack now while they're weakened," Morrison ordered. Human battleships and cruisers opened fire on the enemy vessels. For the first time in the war, human weapons actually damaged the shadow ships. Without the full power from their harvested energy source, the enemy could not maintain their dimensional defenses. Inside the parallel dimension, Alex led his squadron in a direct assault on the enemy mothership. The massive structure was defended by weapons that fired pure darkness, beams that tried to erase anything they touched from existence. But Alex had learned to think in the strange physics of the dimensional space, dodging attacks by willing his ship to be somewhere else. "Phase Hunter squadrons, target the energy collectors on the mothership," Dr. Johnson's voice came through the communication system. "Those are the devices draining power from the prisoners." The human fighters dove toward the mothership, firing modified plasma weapons that could exist in both dimensions simultaneously. Each hit on an energy collector freed thousands of trapped minds, adding their strength to the growing rebellion. Dr. Campbell's voice suddenly filled all communication channels, speaking not just to the human forces but to every aware mind in the dimensional prison. "To all survivors of all worlds, this is your moment. Fight back now. Remember who you were before they took you. Remember your names, your families, your homes." The response was incredible. Across hundreds of floating prison worlds, billions of beings remembered their identities and began to resist the mental chains that held them. The energy streams feeding the enemy mothership turned from steady flows into chaotic flashes of power. Alex's fighter reached the heart of the mothership, a chamber the size of a city where the oldest and most powerful enemy leaders waited. These beings had been harvesting civilizations for so long that they had forgotten their own origins, existing only to consume the life force of others. "You cannot stop the harvest," one of the ancient enemies spoke directly into Alex's mind. "We have consumed 1,000 galaxies. Your resistance means nothing." "Maybe not," Alex replied, arming the special weapon Dr. Stone had built into his fighter. "But we're going to try anyway." The weapon was not designed to destroy the enemy leaders. Instead, it was built to do something much more dangerous to beings who had lived by stealing the life force of others. It cut off their connection to the dimensional prison, forcing them to exist on their own power for the first time in millions of years. Without the constant flow of harvested energy, the ancient enemy leaders began to age rapidly. Their immortal forms crumbled as they experienced the natural passage of time they had avoided for eons. Within minutes, beings who had terrorized the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed turned to dust. The mothership began to collapse as its power sources failed completely. Alex raced back toward the dimensional gateway, but he was not alone. Thousands of liberated prisoners were following him, their consciousness finally free to return to the normal universe. All phase hunters, return to normal space immediately, Admiral Morrison ordered. The dimensional prison is collapsing. Alex's fighter burst through the dimensional gateway just as the enemy's parallel dimension began to tear itself apart. Behind him came a flood of liberated minds, each one returning to bodies that had been kept alive by the enemy's harvest technology. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had been thought destroyed, people began to wake up. The Zephyrians of Kethmore found themselves alive again in restored cities. Humans from the lost colonies opened their eyes to see familiar skies. Countless species that had been harvested over the millennia discovered that death was not the end of their story. The enemy, fleet, cut off from their power source and leaderless, began to surrender. Some of the shadow ships revealed themselves to be operated by beings who had been prisoners just like the others, forced to serve their captors to survive. These aliens welcomed liberation and begged forgiveness for the crimes they had been forced to commit. President Carter stood before the United Nations of Earth and the Reformed Galactic Council, addressing representatives from over 200 species that had been thought extinct. Today we have learned that death is not always final, that hope can survive even the darkest prison, and that the youngest species in the galaxy can stand alongside the oldest when freedom is at stake, she said to the assembled crowd. Admiral Morrison was placed in command of the new Galactic Defense Force, a military organization made up of ships and personnel from all the liberated worlds. Their mission was to hunt down the remaining enemy fleets that still roamed the void between galaxies. Dr. Campbell established the Interdimensional Research Institute, dedicated to understanding the technology that had been used to harvest civilizations and ensuring it could never be misused again. Lieutenant Commander Alex Murphy became the first human to be honored by over 50 different alien species for his role in their liberation. But he spent most of his time training new pilots to fly dimensional fighters, knowing that somewhere in the vast universe, other harvester fleets continued their ancient work. The war had ended, but the peace that followed was built on the understanding that evil could hide in the spaces between realities, and that all free beings must stand together to protect the light of civilization from the hungry darkness. On Earth, children learned in school about the Black Tempest and how it had brought not destruction, but the greatest liberation in galactic history. The storm had passed, leaving behind not ashes but seeds of hope that would grow across the stars for generations to come.